Hello and welcome to the third and final revision video on the Cambridge iGCSE English Language Extended paper. So this video focuses on question 3, the summary question. So first of all, we need to go through what the summary question actually involves. So it's worth 20 marks, quite a considerable amount of the marks for this paper, similarly to question 1. It's based on only one text, so this question focuses on text B, whereas questions 1 and 2 will have just focused you on text A. It's divided into two sections. So the first section assesses your ability to read and select the relevant information. So you go through and you're picking out the facts. Whereas the second section, part B, assesses how well you use that information that you've just selected in part A to write clearly and succinctly using your own. So sometimes people aren't exactly clear what summary means and what exactly the question's asking of them. And the way I tend to think about it is, say you're talking to a friend, you've read a really interesting article that you want to tell them about, but you don't want to tell them every single word that was in that article. You just want to give them the main points, the things that were interesting to them. You're not going to say it word for word as well. You'll put it in your own words and you'll try and make it kind of clear and interesting for your friend so that they understand it without having to read it for themselves. And that's basically what you are doing in this question. So the first part of it is that real sense of reading with a purpose. You're reading it so that you can then tell your friend or tell the examiner what it's actually about and summarise it for them. So again, a highlighter is really essential for this question, or just some way of underlining and picking out the key information. The first part of it really is important to read the question carefully first so you know what information you need to select. Just like if you were telling someone else about that article, you'd only pick out the main points. You would cut out maybe the waffle in the introduction, bits that you know wouldn't interest them. And it's exactly the same with this. You're just reading text B to answer this question. So you just need to select the information that answers that question. And as you're reading the text, go through, highlight any information which answers the question. And you might have a massive amount highlighted in the end, but it doesn't matter, because what you're doing then is you're just focusing in, and as you're reading, you're thinking about what are you going to be picking out in order to answer that question. And really the important thing as you're highlighting, you're aiming for 15 points for 15 marks. The first part A, is worth 15 marks, and they're going to give you a mark for each of those questions. They're looking for 15 points. So try and hedge your bets, try and get the more points that you can so that you've got a better chance of getting those full 15 marks. Try and get over 15 if you can, and really try and get as many points as answer that question for this. There's a word of warning here. This question has changed this year. So for Year 11s currently sitting this exam, the question will not look like this. This is what the question used to look like. And it was just one single piece that you would have to write with part A and part B, looking at the two texts and writing a whole summary, one side in total, just summarising, and you'd get the two separate parts of the mark. So 15 marks for the content, 5 for the quality of your writing. So if you look at past papers, it will look like that. It might be helpful to answer past questions that look like that, but that's not exactly what you're going to have to do in your exam. Your exam will look a little bit more like this. So we've got the two halves to the question. The first half of it then is the bit where it will tell you, first of all, what you're looking for. So read quite carefully passage B, this text called Trophy Hunting, in the reading booklet insert, and then answer question 3A and B on the question paper. And you'll see the question paper is really nicely set out. So it's got the bullet points for you to fill in, and then on the next page it's got the lines for you to write your continuous answer. Okay, so part A is your notes part, and it gives you the question clearly. What are the benefits of allowing trophy hunting according to passage B? Write your answer using short notes. You do not need to use your own words, and that's important because for this part, for part A, you're just lifting the information from the text and putting it down, anything that answers the question. And there's 15 marks available for the content, and you just list it under where the bullet points are here. Then you've got the second part of it, which is the summary, and this is the place where you get your 5 marks for the quality of your writing, and it'll tell you, use your notes to write a summary of what passage B tells you about the benefits of allowing trophy hunting. So this is the bit now where you're telling your friend everything you've read about it, and in this bit you need to use continuous writing because you're being marked for the actual writing skills, not note form. And it does tell you to use your own words as far as possible. Now there's going to be words in there that you can't change, key content words, trophy hunting for example. There's not many other ways to say it, and if you do start trying to say that in a different way, it's going to read a bit strangely and it's not going to flow nicely. And it does say also your summary needs to include all 15 points from part A, and it gives you advice that it needs to be, well, it tells you it must be 200 to 250 words. So try and stick to that as closely as possible. So basically part A is like your preparation for part B. So if I was looking at part A first of all, and I'm going to the question, I've got my highlighter ready, I'm going to start, I need to focus in on this part of it. What are the benefits of allowing trophy hunting? So I've looked at that question and that's giving me the focus to allow me to read. So here is the text, and I've got my highlighter ready, and I'm going to be scanning through it, trying to pick out anything that's going to tell me the advantages, the benefits of trophy hunting. So I'll read the bit of blurb at the top telling me what trophy hunting is if I'm not too clear about it. The aim is to shoot rare animals to show off. It's still big business. Okay, so the rest of the article should be pretty clear. So the first sentence kind of just gives you a bit of background, but it does say it's supported by conservationists who maintain the sport protects wildlife. So that might be something I pick out to begin with, the fact that the sport protects wildlife. But the rest of the paragraph doesn't really give me too much information. It's quite specific. However, if I go on to the second paragraph, that does give me quite a bit of information. Despite my wonky highlighting, I might pick out there that, okay, first bit is matched by many benefits. I'm going to hone in on that. What are the benefits? It says here, hunters are prepared to pay thousands of pounds for the chance to shoot trophy species. So I'm going to pick out the fact that hunters will pay thousands of pounds. Then it goes on. The money they bring, maybe not quite as important, but it provides jobs. It encourages people to preserve the landscape rather than turning it into farmland. So those are definite benefits. It also says a proportion of that money reaches conservation organisations. That's got to be a benefit. And what do those conservation organisations do? They promote wildlife, they protect the natural habitat. So we're starting to get quite a good range of points here. Next paragraph then, again, the first paragraph doesn't give us too much information. I might hone in on the fact that it says that they've got to be well managed, but the key fact here, it increases in animal populations. And that's due to conservation initiatives. So those key things I'm going to be picking out. Directly responsible for the recovery of at least 3 rare species. So that's something I notice I'm not highlighting every word in the sentence. I'm just picking out the bits that I need to remind me to focus back in on those when I read back and write my summary. It also says it's assisted the recovery of white rhino numbers, so that's got to be an advantage. It has played a role in rehabilitating wildlife areas, another advantage. So I'm starting to get a good range of points. It also says then the money generated is particularly important in areas that are unable to attract tourists, so that's another benefit. It encourages local people to put in place anti-poaching measures, that's got to be an advantage. And it tells you a massive number, 1,400,000 square kilometres of land are protected because of hunting. So that's going to give me some points to put in. And then also, trophy hunting's worth more than £100 million to Africa. So that's got to be something. I might not give the details of the name of this person or the background to it, because that's not absolutely fundamental to telling me the advantages of. But what does he say? He says that in many areas where there's no ecotourism, it gives a source of income far less damaging than the alternative of illegal and uncontrolled poaching. So that's going to be something that again is a benefit of trophy hunting. The rest of it doesn't really seem too relevant to answering the question. It says about what conservationists should do. It says what the problems are, which again is the opposite of answering the question. So hopefully if I've got all of that highlighted, I've got a good range. So your first part's done, the highlighting's finished. You can then go on and you can answer part A, and you'll have the bullet points in the paper, and you want to try and get your 15 points written down. So I'd have my highlighted text in front of me as I'm answering the question. The only problem with this example text is this is taken from an old paper, like you saw at the beginning, where you would have had 2 passages to answer and get your 15 marks on. So there aren't actually 15 marks in the mark scheme for this. However, we've managed to get a good range of points here. So remember that in your exam there will easily be 15 marks rather than in this one where I think there were 11 in the mark scheme. So my first bit of highlighting was saying that the sport protects wildlife. So my first bullet point I'm going to write down, one of the benefits of trophy hunting is it protects wildlife. My second point is my second bit of highlighting, that hunters will pay huge amounts of money. And notice this is in note form, but I can use the words of the question. The next bit I highlighted was that it provides jobs, encourages preservation of landscape, money goes towards conservation to protect the wildlife and the natural habitat, so that's my 5th point in that paragraph. And then I'm moving on to the next paragraph, where I've picked out that it increases animal populations. Notice also I'm not picking out everything I've highlighted because I don't want to be too repetitive, and some of those points don't actually make sense unless you've got the rest of the highlighting with it. Then my next point, it helps the recovery of rare species. It plays a role in rehabilitating wildlife areas, which is the end bit of highlighting in that paragraph. Moving on to the next paragraph, it helps areas where tourists don't visit. It encourages local people to develop anti-poaching measures. A large amount of the land is protected because of hunting, that's your 1,400,000 square kilometres. Trophy hunting is worth more than £100 million to Africa. And the final point I've got here is that it provides a source of income for areas without ecotourism, which is less damaging than illegal poaching. So even without 15 full points in there, I've managed to get 13, which is a really good number. And as you'll see from where we go on to the mark scheme, you need to have, and the reason you need to have more than you think is when you look at the mark scheme, it's a really difficult, really picky mark scheme. So I thought I had 13 really good points here. According to the mark scheme, there's only 11, and they're going to give you 1 mark for each. And anywhere where you repeat it, or any point that you think, so for example in point 4, they've put 2 things in there, you're only going to get 1 mark from that. So I will probably get my 11 marks, but you can see my first point, the fact that it protects wildlife, isn't actually on there. So I'm not going to get a mark for that one, but I would for my second one, I would for my third one. And you can see, go through it, I'm going to get my 11 marks, but I'm not getting marks for a couple of those points, and that's really important in this exam to think. It is a really harsh, really specific mark scheme, and that's why at least 15 points, if not more, to allow you for maybe some repetition or some areas where the examiners, the mark scheme, don't think that point counts. So once you've done your 15 bullet points and you've answered part A, you've done most of the hard work. Hopefully you've got some good way towards getting 15 marks, and that's a massive amount of your exam paper. So the next part of it, it's only worth 5 marks, but this is where you actually write up your summary. And again, look at the mark scheme for this one. This is all about the quality of your writing. So looking at that, to try and get the most marks possible, keep it short, don't waffle on. It does say about exceeding the word limit, that's suddenly going to lose you marks. If you look at band 4, even when you start dropping down, the summary is mostly focused but might have an inappropriate introduction or conclusion, so don't waffle on at the beginning or the end. But also you need to write enough, because band 3 says responses might be list-like or not well sequenced, and that's where things like using connectives will really help, because that stops it being list-like and that allows the sequencing to come together. But then again, if you look at band 4 for 2 marks, it does say about repetition, unnecessarily long, lifting phrases. So you need to make sure that you are using your own words as much as possible, not just lifting it straight out of those summaries that you've written. So pick out the key words from those bits that you've selected and make sure you change them to your own words, and that will allow you to get towards band 1 5 marks, which will allow you a well-focused summary. It'll make sure that you've expressed all your points and try and get all 15 of those marks in if you can. And it's concise, but it's fluent, and you're using your own words. Notice it does say where appropriate, and you can't use your own words all the time. There will be keywords that you just can't change. So thinking about using your connectives and thinking about how can you actually revise for this. This is in everyone's planner. This is a really useful little resource. The connectives tube map, learn all the ones on the green line, those ones to add more information also furthermore additionally will help, but also some of the other ones. So a lot of people say it's really hard to revise for English language. Learning your language terminology will really help with question 2. Learning some connectives and having a good bank of these at your fingertips will really help with question 3 as well. And again, it's about being methodical for part B. So you look at what the question's asking, you write a summary of what it tells you about the benefits of allowing trophy hunting, you remind yourself of the focus of the question, and what I would do is have in front of me my bullet points. So either sort of turn that page over or write on an extra bit of paper, however you can, but it says you need to include those 15 points that you had on your bullet points into your summary. So have them there for you rather than lifting straight out of the text. Look at all of the parts together. So my first bullet point, I'd be focusing on bringing in, but I do want to kind of put a sentence in my paragraph before I begin, just showing I'm answering the question. Not an overly long introduction, we don't want to bring our marks down, but I just put something like, there are a number of benefits of allowing trophy hunting. Then I'd bring in my first bullet point and I'd put a connective to link it in. Firstly, the activity helps safeguard wildlife, and I'm trying to change the key words because I want to use my own words as much as possible. So rather than saying protect, I'm going to use the word safeguard. Wildlife, though, is a harder word to change, and I think it'll change the meaning too much if I don't use that one. So I'm leaving that. Then I'm going to bring my next bullet point in, and I'm going to use another connective. Furthermore, hunters are willing to pay large amounts of money for the opportunity to trophy hunt. Okay, I'm going to make it quite clear. I've tried to get it across as well as I can do. Then I'm going to bring in my next bullet point. This money goes on to provide work opportunities. Again, changing the words rather than jobs, I've said work opportunities. It means locals are willing to protect the landscape for hunters rather than turning it into agricultural land. So I've included points 3 and points 4 as well in there as well. Also, another connective, trying to vary them as much as possible. The money is given to conservation groups who help preserve the natural habitat. So this is my bullet point 5. And again, preserve rather than protect will help out there. So my next bullet point about it increasing animal populations, I can work in with helping recovery of rare species, but that all comes as a result of the money that goes towards them. So I'm going to use a different type of connective here, and I'm going to put in consequently. The money given to these conservation groups helps the number of animals in these areas to grow. So I'm going to try and use a different word that increases, and has even contributed to rare species such as the Montebok wildebeest and Cape Mountain zebra being reinstated. And I put a few examples from the text rather than my kind of quite brief bullet point, just to make it really, really clear. Points. And then I'm moving on with another connective. Additionally, the income helps in the recovery of areas of wildlife. So that's point 8 on my list of bullet points. It plays a role in rehabilitating wildlife areas. And again, I've used recovery rather than rehabilitates. Then I want to bring in point 9. So I've used another connective. Moreover, this income is able to reach areas where fewer tourists visit and allows these areas to instate anti-poaching measures with huge areas of Africa now being protected in this way. So again, I've managed to incorporate a couple of bullet points in that way. In that point, but it still reads, I've still got the main points covered, and it still reads nicely and cohesively without too much waffle. In fact, trophy hunting brings in more than £100 million to Africa. So there's my point 12, and again, in fact is kind of a way of developing that point rather than just adding more information. Then I'm going to add in my last bullet point. In these areas where ecotourism is low, the income is a far better option than the illegal poaching that would occur instead. And I've wrapped it all up nicely. I don't need an overly long summary. It's kind of all the key points are there, all the information's clear. So you can see I've taken the keywords and I've made sure I've changed them into my own words as far as possible. I've used lots of connectives. I've tried to make it clear enough so it makes sense, but so that it doesn't have too many extra superfluous bits of information. And that really is all I need to do for those 5 marks. It said 200 to 250 words. This is about 190 words here, and if I had a further 2 bullet points, that would take it up easily to 200 plus, which is exactly what the exam board want to see, exactly what the examiners and the mark scheme are expecting. So just to pull it all together, a few top tips that we've just gone through. First of all, start reading the question first. Same advice for every other part of this exam. It's really important to help you read with a purpose. You'll know what information you're trying to select. And then absolutely essential is to use your highlighter as you read through, so you're only selecting that relevant information. You might highlight some extra stuff, but it will just kind of keep you focused and mean it's so much easier to go back when you're writing your bullet points. Try and get the maximum number of points that you can do. Aim for 15 plus, because as you've just seen, the mark scheme is harsh, it's difficult, so try and play them at their own game. Try and hedge your bets so that you get as many as possible. When you're writing your bullet points, when you're doing your part A, Try and write clear phrases. Don't write anything too short so it loses meaning. So for example, jobs, that single one word probably wouldn't give you the marks that you needed. Instead I would write provides job opportunities. Then when you're writing your actual summary, when you're writing part B, use your connectives to structure it. Try and include, or make sure you include, all of the points that you had in your bullet points summary for part A. And then as you go through, select the keywords you can change so that you're using your own words. And finally, when you've written that summary, to try and get as close to the top band as you can and get those 5 marks, check it through and just give it a last little read through, make sure it flows, make sure it makes sense to anyone reading who hasn't read the article themselves. And overall, good luck. It should be a real gift of a question. Those 15 marks, if you read it carefully, should be really easy to get, and then you just need to put it in your own words. So make sure you do answer this question well. Don't avoid it and don't rush it at the end, because it really is the one that will give you the difference between those few grade boundaries.